Hey there, I'm Joe Weems, and welcome to another episode of Legion by the Numbers. In this episode, we are going to examine the question, should clones ever take grenades? I was recently pondering because there's this brand new grenade that has just been announced, the Sonic Imploder. It does a black dye and it's suppressive. And I was watching some other YouTubers, Krabok, comment about the Sonic Imploders and how he kind of thought it was kind of a useless grenade overall. I sort of tended to agree with him. I play a lot of clones. I almost never take grenades on my clones. But I was thinking about, when is there a possibility of a time that a grenade can actually make sense on a clone? And there was a couple of scenarios, or at least one good scenario that kind of came up that I wondered, is it better to use grenades in this scenario or to shoot? So I'd like to explore that today. And we're going to use a basic Clone Trooper Z6 layout here. If you'll watch some of my previous videos, you'll know that I always like using the Clone Specialist. You got to have targeting scopes with your Z6, otherwise you might as well be taking the DC-15. And of course you do need two aims as well in order to make that make sense, but that's still a very standard layout, is to use the Z6 on some phase 1 clones. So we're going to use that as our basis, and we're going to look at the scenario of, what if you were in enough range that you could move and use a grenade instead of staying where you are and aiming and shooting? And what's the difference? And is there ever a time when it actually would be better to move, get into that range 1, use a grenade, instead of sitting and aiming and shooting? So we're going to look at that scenario. In a recent game that I played actually just yesterday, I didn't actually notice a lot of times when I could have used a grenade at range 1, but there were potentially some times I could have moved and been within range 1 and then used some grenades. So we're just going to look at that really quickly and look at the scenarios here and see if that ever makes sense. So to start off with, we're going to go, I'm going to eliminate a couple of grenades that I'm not even going to look at. We're not going to look at EMP droid poppers. They do give ion 1. I think that you would take EMP droid poppers if you're just tired of getting beat up by armor and droids. And you really need that ion 1, but because it's not universal, it doesn't really have, and because what it does is it takes away an action. The dice simulator doesn't necessarily show us if it's better or not, especially since it's black dice, which is what clones already have. So we're not going to look at that. We're not going to look at the smoke grenades because those are about providing cover. And then we're also not going to consider the Sonic Imploders because, again, just like their built-in die, they're black, and they just make it suppressive. So you might take these if you really feel like you want suppression in your army. We're going to look instead at the Concussion Grenade, the Fragmentation Grenade, and the Impact Grenade, and see if it ever makes sense to move in with one move and use that grenade instead of staying where you are aiming and shooting, and kind of the scenarios there. So we're going to start with the Concussion Grenade. We're going to add that to our unit. That's going to bring them up all the way up to 93 points. Those extra 3 points are such a small margin on top of what it already costs to put together the phase 1 clone troopers. It's really not much of a cost. Obviously, you still could be starved for points, so you still might not take that. But we're going to go with the Concussion Grenades. And the thing that Concussion Grenades add is they add blast. So it's not so much that they themselves give you better dice, it's that they remove the heavy cover. So are there situations where that blast is better than an aim? So let's go in and let's outfit our troopers. Those 93 points. They have 5 black and 6 white. They have precise 1. And then if you're going to just stand and shoot, it's going to be 1 aim token. Or sorry, you're going to aim and shoot. Stay where you are, aim and shoot. It's 1 aim token. So let's look at shooting against red into heavy cover, how much damage that does with 1 aim token just standing and shooting. And so that does 1.78 on average with a 14% miss chance. But now let's switch that over to having moved. So you lose your aim. Now precise doesn't even help you out. But you move in and you use a grenade. Now in this case, you're only going to want one of your troopers to use their grenade. It actually honestly doesn't matter on the basic ones, because whether they use the grenade for a black or they use the regular gun for a black, it's the same. It's just a black. But now we get blast, so that means the cover goes away. We're still going to obviously want to use the Z6 weapon. We're not going to want that trooper to use the grenade, so we'll still have the 6 white. And so in that case, using the blast over standing and shooting, what's our result? Well, lo and behold, it actually makes more sense to move in and use the concussion grenade and get that blast than it does to stay where you are and aim. Now, that would likely hold true if we had 2 aim tokens. Let's just check that. Here we are. If we already had an aim token, we were able to get a second aim token. We're going to find 2.3. And then if we moved in and instead of having 2, we only had 1, is it still going to be better? And yeah, it's still better, still 2.75. So let's also look at if that makes any difference based on the defense die of the defender. So let's go to white with block, and that's 2.39, and then white with nothing is 2.98, and then let's compare that to using the concussion grenade. So white with block is 2.68, so still an improvement. White with nothing, 3.3, still an improvement. So in the case of the concussion grenade, if you did have a concussion grenade equipped and you could choose between staying where you are, aiming and shooting, or making one move, getting within range 1, and using the concussion grenade, it's actually better to use the concussion grenade at range 1. Now, this doesn't account for the fact that you might then expose yourself more to counterattack, might make it easier for some Jedi to move in and melee you, and you may not want to move at all. But if all things being equal, if you could move and use a concussion grenade versus stay where you are and aim, it's better to move and use the concussion grenade. So now let's look, instead of the concussion grenade, at the fragmentation grenade. And we're still going to use this against troopers. When we do the impact grenades, we're going to talk about going against armor. So with the fragmentation grenades, now all of a sudden you go from black to red die and you get surge to crit. So let's go back to our basic attack here. We know that it was 1.78 by just standing there and aiming. So instead of that, we're going to lose the aim. We're going to move and use the fragmentation grenade. In that case, we're going to want to switch all 5 of our regular troopers over to the grenades because that'll go from black to white. The question is, should we switch over the Z6 from trooper from the 6 white to a red die? The answer is probably no. We could look at that. But let's go ahead and just switch the regular troopers. They're going to go to 0 black, and we're going to go to 5 red, and now we also have surge to crit. The cover doesn't get affected because the fragmentation doesn't affect cover the way the concussion does. So we were getting 1.78 with the frag grenades. We're getting 22. That is not, oh, I put in 50, not 5. My bad. Let's try that again. All right, 2.3 instead of 1.78 with the frag grenades. So that's a really big deal. I think that probably comes down a little bit to also having so many white dice, much higher chance that one of those will roll a surge. Being able to surge to crit makes a big difference with such a large white die pool. So that 2.33 is also even better than the frag grenade. The frag grenade was 2.0. Sorry, the concussion grenade was 2.0, where the frag grenade is 2.33. We can assume we're going to see similar numbers. So now the frag grenade is 5 more points than the concussion grenade was. So some of our efficiency is going to be lost just a little bit. But still, let's add that. I'm sure it's not going to make a big difference here. And instead of 40.7 points per, so instead of 39 points per, it was about 41. So a small change, but still less than the 46 with the concussion grenade. So the frag grenade with your Z6 is probably the right choice to use if you can afford the points, and that gives you an option in that one case of moving. The other thing that's really nice about a frag grenade is if you're going to be using any fire support, because now you're surging to crit, so other dice pools that join yours also surge to crit. A really nice benefit there. So does this mean that I'm going to start outfitting my clones with grenades? I'm not really, with either the concussion or the frag grenade. It looks like the frag grenade's the right one there. I'm not really sure about that. Let's try just one more thing, and let's get rid of our 6 white and go all the way to 6 red and just see if that is any better or worse. And I'm sure it's going to be worse, but let's just actually run the numbers. Yeah, significantly worse, 1.6 instead of 2.3. So a pretty big fall off from using, you want to keep the Z6, but go to the frag grenades. So the final scenario I want to look at is going up against armor and how much those impact grenades can actually add if you do that, and what scenario you might want, how many of the impact you might want to get. So let's go back to our regular old Z6, but instead of going against a red, defense dice, and heavy cover, we'll go to no cover, armor, and let's just use white, search to block. That's probably more common of all the units that have armor, is a white search to block. And so that Z6 unit in that case is going to do on average 1.2. But what if you could move in and get the impact using the impact grenades? So the impact grenades are the same cost, but each one, this is unique. Unlike Ion, the droid poppers, they actually add one impact per grenade that you use. So you can get up to impact 6 instead of if you have all 6 of your clones use the impact grenades. So, but it is still a black die, so the die profile doesn't change. But now instead of the aim token, we're going to have impact. So obviously we want to start off with at least all 5 of them using impact, using the impact grenades instead of the regular weapon, because it's the same die. It just adds impact. So if we roll that, all of a sudden we're doing 2.5, a little over 2.5 with only a 4% chance of missing. Then the next question is, does it make any sense to have the Z6 use it? My guess is it doesn't again, but let's just try that out. We'll go to 0 white, 6 black, and impact 6. And if we roll that, no, the numbers go down. So I personally don't find that I'm inside of a really close range with a lot of armor that this tempts me to go to adding an impact grenade to my clones, just because the chance that I'm going to use those, I don't know, maybe if I had a lot of units, I might outfit 1 or 2 of them with impact and then try to move them towards the armor that might get placed on the field. But I'd probably rely more on either equipping them with armor, as we saw in a previous video. Giving them the rocket launcher is actually a really good weapon. It's still a great weapon, unless you're doing a lot of aim token sharing and you rely on aims, in which case the Z6 is a better weapon. But the rocket launcher is actually a pretty good weapon in general, and that gives you your impact, but now you can get it at range 4. So, or relying on my Jedi to do the heavy work against armor. So I don't think I'd go with impact grenades, but looking at this, I think the frag grenades could be a compelling reason, if you can spare the points, to outfit on some of your clones, because that opportunity to move and attack versus stand where you are and aim and attack actually makes a pretty big difference. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure and like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in future videos.